What up, friends? I probably took a shower, and today we're going to be reviewing Joywave's newest album, Cleanse. This is the fourth studio album by the New York indie rock band Joywave. Now, Joywave, they're a pretty consistent group, I think. They always know how to balance having fun with poking fun at the world in a pretty cheeky way. Their last album in particular really impressed me with a great instrumental variety and a deeper emphasis on the commentary in the lyrics. This album is still solid, however, by homogenizing their sound a bit in comparison to the previous release, it kind of feels a bit more standard and safe in the grand scheme of indie. The opening track, Pray for the Reboot, gives off a pretty good first impression though, with its ominous sounding synth and bass-driven instrumentals. It feels like a purgatory of sorts, with these melancholic guitar passages and vocal deliveries alongside this sort of hospital equipment sound effects in the background. The lyrics are also fittingly bleak as well, talking about a lot of things that have happened over the past few years, like the rise of misinformation, the COVID pandemic, and how they wish we could just kind of reboot the last few years and try to get it right this time. A few other tracks on this record, like Buy American, are fine, however, don't feel as adventurous compared to some of the other songs on this project. The chorus is a pretty nice intro to this track, however, I find the verses to be a little low impact in comparison. I love the funkier bass and keys on the pre-chorus though, and the flows in this section of the song are also pretty great. Seeing the guitar being used as an accent piece rather than being front and center also helps differentiate this track from some of the others. The satire of American consumerism in the lyrics is also really well done, however, I wish the instrumental backed up these ideas further. Every Window is a Mirror is another one of my favorites, featuring a fairly chill instrumental but also having a glitchy presence to it as well. The big bass emphasis is great, and the vocals and general vibe on this track is pretty different for the band. I like how they experimented a bit with this one. The contrast between the somber verses and the high-energy, shouted chorus is great, and it highlights the sort of self-reflection and realizing how a lot of your observations about the world reflect your innermost thoughts, and some of those might not be ones that you want to acknowledge very much. It's kind of a self-reflection in that your interpretations about the world reflect your own feelings, ones that you might kind of want to bury. It is a bit esoteric lyrically, however, I do think it kind of fits the haze of not knowing who you are and trying to figure that out. Sin City 2000 is another pretty interesting one, I think. The quirky synths are a fun opener, and it just feels like a classic Joywave track through and through. I love the usual dry humor coming through the lyrics, and combining it with a somewhat cheeky and dramatic instrumental is very amusing to me. The bridge especially has that theatric touch that hits just right, especially as the lyrics are talking about trying to remain non-cynical and avoid comparing yourself to others. It's basically just saying to fight cynicism and move at your own pace. Don't try to get there first, and it doesn't really matter if people make it there before you. Like Every Window is a Mirror, After Coffee is another vibey moment in Joywave's catalog. It's very smooth in its bass and flows, and having the guitar only really come in during the chorus is a very great and effective way at backing up the emotions that fill the vocals and the lyrics. The track is pretty dark, even by Joywave standards, essentially just showcasing someone's daily routine in the morning before their depression kind of gets the best of them and they are contemplating suicide, essentially. They then drive out to the coast but are too scared to jump, as the song puts it. It's probably one of their most introspective songs to date, to be honest, and it's one of my favorites on here as well. We Are All We Need is another song that I feel like has a bit of missed potential. I like the shouted vocals on the verses, but I find it to be instrumentally repetitive. Like, they really like that guitar riff, man. The chorus is a pleasant, elegant moment on the track alongside the synth line in the bridge. However, these moments almost feel out of place compared to the instrumental in the verses. I also find the lyrics to be a bit lacking here. It seems to be talking about how constantly thinking that you're better than other people will end up making you feel hollow inside. However, the lyrics don't really delve far enough into this topic for my liking, and they tend to be pretty vague too. Goodbye Tommy, unfortunately, is probably the one track that I just don't care for at all on here. It kind of sounds like those cheesy 80s power ballads with someone's name in the titles as they lament over lost love or something. After looking into the track, it turns out this is actually a sort of coping mechanism for the Pulse nightclub shooting, as Tommy is essentially a fictional character that died in this event. One of the members of the band essentially created this character to kind of like better understand the whole scenario involving the tragedy. However, in a way, I feel like this kind of cheapens the impact of this horrific event. Creating a fictional scenario where the real event could have very well been talked about or observed almost feels like a bit of a cop-out, and you don't even really get a semblance of what the song is about unless you look up the backstory of the lyrics, too. Like, when I first heard this, I thought this track was about, like, lost innocence or something. Like, they hooked up with someone and then that was their first instance of, like, being in a relationship with a person or hooking up with someone. But, like, the real story is very different than that interpretation. I also feel like the instrumental style of this track does not convey the weight and gravity of the subject matter either. I really do get the sentiment of the song, but I feel like it missed the mark. The Inversion brings the album back up for me, though. The grittier sound and upbeat pacing really make the song stand out, and that build-up to the intense chorus is really well done. A great blending of dark bass, guitar, and distorted vocals help create a vibe that really isn't matched by any other song on here. The lyrical topics are pretty interesting as well, also fitting the more aggressive delivery, as we're once again talking about misinformation. However, how that misinformation and people's frustrations in general are kind of boiling over into violence in a lot of places. It also addresses how easy it is for hate groups to get mobilized online, which once again fits the aggressive nature of the track. As much as I do like the lyrics, I do think it could have been expanded upon a little bit further, as the more technologic angle to this problem was only briefly touched upon. Why Would You Want to Be Young Again is by far my favorite track on this project. To be honest, this is what I wanted from this album going in. Haunting and distorted beats and vocals, interesting and dark lyrical topics, all wrapped together nicely with a melancholic edge. That industrial-esque beat is a fantastic backdrop to the tired and apathetic lyrical angle, essentially denouncing society's infatuation with youth. It also addresses how a lack of responsibility made kids' lives far more chaotic than many people might remember them being. The elegant synth and guitar that come in during the chorus adds a softer touch to the track, as the boys in Joywave are kind of looking back at their own childhoods and trauma and realizing how much better their lives are today as adults. I feel like the dry wit of the lines, "Why would you want to be young again? Taxed by your fears, not your government. Why would you want to be young again? Who has the time for the suffering?" embodies this mindset perfectly. This actually might be one of my favorite Joywave songs, period, man. Like, it's that good. The last track, "Have You Ever Lit a Year on Fire," ends the album on a really good note. It features a western-sounding twangy guitar and a synthetic and crisp beat. The main riffs are punchy and clean, and the more quirky instrumentals are given a pretty nice supporting role here. The flows are, again, kind of apathetic sounding, however in a more, like, cruelly humorous way, as, you know, in 2021, things were starting to get back to relatively normal, but for bands like Joywave, like, their lives were still kind of stuck on lockdown. The pandemic was still hitting them hard, as a lot of shows were still postponed or canceled entirely. It almost has like a psychedelic edge here and there, which makes sense, and it's fitting for a track that is almost like suspended in a dream state, as Joywave are wondering if they'll even outlast and survive this extended pandemic. It's essentially like, looking at it like, are we even going to weather the storm of all of the world's crises at this point? Now, despite being a bit standard in the grand scheme of things, this is still a very solid project from Joywave. The sound of the album was pretty consistent and also had a decent amount of variety, and the lyrics are also still very good for the most part. However, there are moments on this project where I feel like they just didn't go far enough. There are some that are kind of your standard Joywave songs, which are nice but don't necessarily do much new, and then there's that one track like Goodbye Tommy that I feel kind of missed the mark entirely. I really wish the rest of the record was as experimental as Why Would You Want to Be Young Again? It's a fantastic expansion of their previous sounds with excellent lyrical themes. I just wish we could have gotten more of it. All that said though, it's a fun project and really not one a fan of the band should miss out on. I'm feeling a strong 7 on Joywave's Cleanse. Of course we do have to talk about album covers on this show, and this is a banger, bro. This is fucking heat. Like, the aesthetic of this album cover is fantastic. The neon colors alongside the sort of retro car aesthetic, it's kind of cyberpunky. It fits the more synthy tendencies of some of this album's songs. The more low-key and vibey moments of this album as well also fit this aesthetic really nicely. Just the general composition of this album cover is fantastic. You get the little Easter eggs, like the name of the band, where the radio would be and stuff like that. Like, this is a really fun album cover. I think they knock it out of the park with this one. But that is all I have to say about Joywave's newest album. What do you guys think? Did you like this more than their previous album? Is this a natural sort of expansion on their sound? Or did you feel like it was a little too safe for them? Let me know. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell if you want to clean me. Don't do that. But until the next one, farewell.